Not tonight or any night, my husband declared. So I decided to redirect my time, energy, and resources elsewhere. A couple of days later, he was asking for forgiveness. But I was done. Hey everyone, before we dive into today's video, I really need your help. We've noticed our channel is losing a little momentum, and hitting that subscribe button is one of the best ways you can support us. It's super quick, totally free, and it helps us keep delivering awesome content. Your support genuinely means the world to us. Let's keep this channel growing strong together. Thanks so much. Now let's get into the video. I'm 34, and I still vividly remember the precise moment those words left Jesse's 32 lips. Not tonight or ever. The sheer finality in his voice chilled me to the bone. We had been married for 6 years, and while things hadn't been perfect recently, I never expected such a definitive statement about our intimate life. A little background about me. I'm a marketing manager at a mid-sized tech company in the Midwest. It's nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills, and I've been steadily moving up the corporate ladder for about 8 years now. I met Jesse during our junior year of college. He was studying psychology and I was in business. We clicked instantly. Both of us were ambitious yet down to earth. We dated for 3 years before getting married in a modest ceremony with about 80 guests, mostly family and close friends. Jesse worked as an HR consultant and earned good money. We bought a 3-bedroom house in a nice suburb about 4 years ago. No kids yet, we were both focused on our careers first. I always thought we had a solid relationship. We both contributed to the household, took 2 vacations a year, usually a beach trip and a visit to family, and had a good social circle of other couples our age. It was a pretty normal life, nothing extraordinary but stable and comfortable. At least that's what I believed. That evening began like any other ordinary day. I arrived home from work exhausted after a 10-hour day dealing with clients and a presentation that hadn't gone as well as I'd hoped. I was looking forward to seeing Jesse, maybe ordering some takeout and watching a movie, our usual routine. The moment I walked in, I could tell something was off. He was sitting at the kitchen island, absorbed by his phone, an unsettling intensity about him. We ate dinner, exchanging mundane details. His coworkers' latest office drama, my project deadlines, the typical everyday chatter. Afterward, we moved to the living room where he continued scrolling through his phone, probably on one of those self-mastery and modern celibacy accounts he'd been obsessed with lately, while I watched some random show on TV. When I leaned over to kiss his neck, a gesture that used to make him smile, he pulled away sharply as if I'd tried to sting him. "Don't," he said, not even looking up from his screen. "I'm not in the mood." "You haven't been in the mood for weeks," I replied, trying hard to suppress my frustration, though I definitely was. "Is everything okay?" That's when he put down his phone, looked me straight in the eyes with a cold expression I'd never seen before, and delivered those crushing words. "Not tonight or ever. I'm done with that part of our relationship." My mind raced through a million possible responses, but I just sat there like an idiot, my mouth probably hanging open. How do you even reply to someone unilaterally ending physical intimacy in a marriage? No explanation, no room for discussion, just a one-sided decision that affected us both. "What exactly do you mean?" I finally managed to ask, hoping I'd misunderstood. "Exactly what I said," he continued, his voice unnervingly calm, as if explaining something simple to a child. "I'm comfortable with our life together, the house, our social circle, the stability. But I'm no longer interested in physical intimacy with you or any woman. I've been reading a lot about how people are conditioned to perform intimacy to maintain relationships, and I've decided I'm not participating in that expectation anymore. You can accept it or not. That's your choice." Wow. He'd been getting deeper into those online communities recently, but I never imagined it would impact our relationship like this. I was completely blindsided. "So, you're just unilaterally deciding that our marriage no longer includes physical intimacy, without any discussion?" I asked, trying to grasp it. "I don't need your permission to set boundaries with my own body," he replied, his tone getting that familiar edge I'd come to recognize whenever he was quoting something from his online groups. "The fact that you think this requires a discussion just shows how entitled people are to their partner's bodies." I sat back, completely stunned. "Jesse, this isn't about entitlement. This is about our relationship, about connection and intimacy between partners who supposedly love each other. Love doesn't mean I have to perform physical acts I no longer want to participate in, he countered. When did this change? When did you stop wanting to be with me that way? I asked, genuinely confused. Just 2 months ago, things had seemed normal. He shrugged. It's been building for a while. I've just finally found the courage to vocalize it, instead of performing for your benefit. That night I slept on the couch. Not because he asked me to, but because I couldn't bear to lie next to someone who had just shattered my understanding of our entire relationship. The next few days were incredibly strange. We continued living together, eating together, even watching TV together. All while this invisible wall stood firmly between us. He acted as if his declaration was as ordinary as announcing he wanted to change grocery stores, not a complete reshaping of our marriage. I tried suggesting counseling over breakfast 3 days after his announcement. I found a couples therapist with good reviews. I think we should talk to someone about what's happening between us. We don't need therapy, he responded dismissively, rolling his eyes. There's nothing wrong with me. And I'm not going to be pressured into physical intimacy, just because society expects it. Maybe you should get therapy for your dependency on validation. Of course, he was right about not being pressured. I would never do that. But his complete unwillingness to even discuss this sudden change left me feeling like I was living with a stranger wearing my husband's face. Everything I said was twisted to make me sound like some sort of oppressor. At night, lying on my side of our now purely functional bed, I'd moved back from the couch, determined not to be displaced in my own home. I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering how I'd missed the gradual breakdown of our connection. Had I been so absorbed in work that I failed to notice him pulling away? Or had he hidden his feelings until reaching some breaking point I never saw coming? I reviewed our recent history, searching for signs. Sure, our sex life had slowed down somewhat over the past year, but that seemed normal for a couple married over 6 years, both working demanding jobs. We still had date nights, still held hands during movies, still told each other I love you before bed. Or at least we had until recently. One thing became starkly clear. I was now in a marriage where I was neither wanted nor needed in any meaningful way. I was simply convenient. A contributor to bills, a social partner for couple-oriented gatherings, a housemate who helped maintain our outward image of marital success. Just another person he could point to when talking to his new friends about how he was setting boundaries. I tried one more time to understand, catching him on a Saturday morning when we were both home. Jesse, I'm trying to respect your feelings, but I need to better understand what's happening. Did I do something wrong? Is there something I can change? He sighed dramatically, as if my question was the most exhausting thing he'd ever heard. This is exactly the problem. You think everything is about you. This is about my journey and my autonomy. The fact that you're making it about what you did wrong just proves my point. But we're married, I said, frustration mounting. Your decisions affect me too. So what? You think your expectation of my body outweighs my right to control it. I walked away from that conversation feeling completely hopeless. 2 weeks after his declaration, I found myself sitting in my car outside our house, unable to summon the energy to go inside. What was waiting for me there? Another evening of polite coexistence with someone who had unilaterally changed the terms of our relationship without any real explanation. Another lecture about how I was part of the problem for expecting basic human connection in a marriage. That's when I realized I had a choice to make. I could continue living in this emotional desert, hoping for rain that would never come, or I could redirect my time, attention, and resources toward something that offered at least the possibility of growth. As I finally walked through our front door, a plan was forming in my mind. Not revenge or some dramatic confrontation, at least not yet, but something more powerful. A complete redirection of my life's energy. If he had moved on from me without physically leaving, maybe I could do the same. My redirection began with small changes. I set my alarm for 5:30 a.m., a full hour before he would wake up. Those quiet morning hours quickly became sacred to me, time that was completely my own, free from his judgmental stare and passive-aggressive comments. I started with 20 minutes of meditation, something I'd always dismissed as impractical with my busy schedule. To my surprise, that brief period of morning stillness helped clear my mind of the constant thoughts about my failing marriage. Next came physical exercise. Nothing dramatic at first, just basic push-ups, sit-ups, and a short run around the neighborhood. By the time he emerged from our bedroom, I had already showered, dressed, and started my day with purpose. "You're up early," he commented on the third day, finding me sipping coffee and reading at the kitchen table. The slight annoyance in his voice was obvious. He was used to me being half asleep while he dominated the morning space. "Just making some changes," I replied casually, not offering any further explanation. He didn't ask for one, just muttered something I pretended not to hear. The second week, I joined a gym near my office. Instead of rushing home after work to an increasingly uncomfortable environment, I spent an hour working out. The physical exertion became a form of therapy. Each repetition pushed out another fragment of resentment and self-pity. I started fantasizing about the future, one where Jesse wasn't the center of my universe. I also reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my marriage. Nothing dramatic, just casual lunches and after-work drinks with soda or coffee. I was careful not to mention my marital situation. These meetings weren't about seeking sympathy or bad-mouthing my husband. They were about rebuilding connections that had nothing to do with my identity as a wife to an increasingly distant man. What was really interesting was realizing how many others were going through similar, not identical but the same pattern. Partners who had gradually transformed into critical strangers, constantly finding fault with normal behavior while expecting the financial benefits and emotional support to continue unchanged. That phrase stuck with me: "You can't win. Not if you keep playing by constantly changing rules you had no say in creating." So maybe the answer was to stop playing altogether and create my own game. My redirection kept expanding. I updated my wardrobe next. Nothing flashy or desperate, just well-fitted clothes that suited my improving physique and projected confidence. When I wore a new shirt to dinner with friends, several people commented on how good I looked. "You've lost weight, haven't you?" Melissa asked during a small get-together. "Just been taking better care of myself," I replied with a smile. Jesse noticed too, though he tried to disguise his interest with criticism. "Isn't that shirt a little tight?" he asked one morning as I was getting ready for work. "Seems like you're trying way too hard." Very midlife crisis energy. I just smiled and left without responding, which seemed to annoy him even more. The redirection extended to my finances as well. We always maintained separate accounts alongside our joint one for household expenses. I continued contributing my share to our joint obligations, but I redirected my discretionary spending. The weekend city spa trip Jesse had been hinting about, as some kind of reset for us without the connection I needed, didn't make sense anymore. That money went instead into a high-yield investment account under only my name. I also invested in a photography workshop, a passion I had abandoned years ago after Jesse complained about the time it took away from us. Ironic now, considering his stance. Photography got me outdoors on weekends, hiking to capture landscapes at dawn when the light was perfect. These solo excursions became another form of meditation. Behind the camera, framing each shot, I found a state of flow that allowed me to forget everything else. I invested in decent equipment, nothing outrageous but a good DSLR camera and a couple of quality lenses. My first few attempts were pretty amateur, but I watched tutorials online and practiced constantly. Soon I was capturing images I was genuinely proud of. Mountain ridges washed in pink light, close-ups of frost on leaves, storm fronts rolling over prairie grass. I started posting my work online, connecting with other photographers, and building a small following that appreciated my eye for composition. Some of my photos even started selling as prints through an online marketplace, creating a small but growing side income that went straight into my separate account. "Where have you been going so early on Saturdays?" Jesse asked after several weeks of my new routine. The entitlement in his voice was crystal clear. He was used to me being available whenever he wanted. "Taking photographs," I answered simply. "Since when are you into photography?" he shot back accusatory, as if I needed his permission to have hobbies. "I've always been into it. I just haven't had the time to pursue it until now." His expression suggested he wanted to ask more, but didn't want to show too much interest in my life after having so deliberately stepped back from it. "Well, I needed help with some things around the house last weekend, but you were nowhere to be found," he complained. Typical. No interest in my activities, just how they inconvenienced him. "You could have texted," I replied calmly. "Phone works even in the mountains. I shouldn't have to text my own wife to get basic help," he snapped. I just shrugged. Things change. At work, my renewed focus paid off. I approached projects with a clarity and confidence that hadn't been there during the months of marital distress. My boss, Rob, noticed. Whatever you're doing, keep it up, he said after I landed a major client that had been on the fence for months. You're on fire lately. The compliment meant more than it should have. After months of feeling unwanted at home, professional recognition filled some of the void. Not completely, but enough to keep moving forward. I volunteered for projects that required travel, something I'd avoided in the past to spend more time with Jesse. A 3-day conference in Chicago, a week-long training in Denver, a client meeting in Boston. Each trip was a breath of fresh air. Hotel rooms where I could spread out without judgment, meals where no one made snide comments about my choices, conversations with people who didn't view every interaction as a referendum on ideology. During my Denver trip, I hiked before sunrise and took some of my best photos yet. When I posted them online, my follower count jumped, and I sold several prints in a week. You know, you could turn this into a real side business, a local photographer told me at a meetup. Your composition is strong. His casual encouragement planted a seed. What if photography wasn't just an escape? What if it could be part of my foundation for a different future? 3 months into my redirection, I was sleeping better, looking better, and performing better in nearly every aspect of my life, except my marriage, which remained an empty shell of formal interactions and parallel existences. The irony wasn't lost on me. In withdrawing affection, Jesse had inadvertently pushed me toward becoming a stronger version of myself. It was like the universe's weird way of compensating. What he didn't know was that I'd opened a separate checking account and started routing a portion of my paychecks there, including performance bonuses. The remainder still covered my share of our joint expenses. I was building an escape fund dollar by dollar, not because I was impulsive, but because I was done being powerless. One evening, as I prepared to leave for a photography walk, he asked an unexpected question. Are you seeing someone else? The entitlement in his voice was unbelievable. He could end our physical relationship unilaterally, but still expected exclusive access to my time and attention. I paused by the door, camera bag over my shoulder. No, I answered truthfully. Why would you ask that? You've changed, he said with a note I couldn't identify. You're hardly ever home anymore. The hypocrisy of his concern almost made me laugh. I'm redirecting my time and energy into things that fulfill me, I replied, using his own clinical approach. Isn't that what you've been doing? That's different, he said, clearly irritated that I'd used his logic. I made a personal choice about my body and autonomy. And I'm making personal choices about my time and interests, I countered. Seems perfectly fair to me. So you're what? Punishing me? He asked, his voice rising. Not at all, I replied calmly. I'm adapting to our new reality. You set a boundary. I respect it. I'm simply setting boundaries of my own. He had no response and I left. For the first time since his declaration, I wasn't hoping he'd change his mind. I was too busy building a life that no longer centered around his approval. At a night shoot workshop, an editor from a local magazine flipped through my camera roll. These are really good. Our nature section loves local work. Interested in submitting? Another door opened. When I got home late, Jesse was already in bed, suddenly interested in my schedule, suddenly concerned about where I'd been. The shift was obvious. He could feel the center of gravity moving away from him. Over the next few weeks, he started initiating small talk, suggesting we watch shows together, even cooking dinner twice. It was like living with a ghost of the man I'd married. Pleasant but hollow. I knew exactly what was happening. He was trying to reestablish control, to pull me back into orbit now that he sensed I was drifting. The realization hardened my resolve. This wasn't revenge. It was self-preservation. 2 events aligned to clarify my next step. First, I received a significant promotion with a substantial raise and more travel. I told no one at home. The information belonged to me. Second, through my professional network, I learned Jesse's company was undergoing a messy restructuring. HR wasn't safe. The timing was brutal, but it was real life, the kind he told me to accept when he made unilateral decisions. I met with a lawyer discreetly, paying from my private account. I learned how to protect myself financially. I documented his declaration about ending intimacy, his refusal of counseling, the timeline. I wasn't trying to win. I was making sure I didn't lose myself again. Days later, his company announced layoffs. He came home shaken. My department might be cut, he said, clearly expecting comfort. That's tough, I replied, offering courtesy but not enmeshment. What's your plan? He blinked, startled by the word. Plan. The layoffs hit faster than expected. The following Friday, he came home in tears. I lost my job, he said. They eliminated our whole group. I'm sorry to hear that, I said neutrally. What's your plan for expenses next month? His jaw dropped. Are you serious? I need time to process. Take the time you need. Our bills don't pause, though. The next morning I made my move. I transferred my portion from the joint account to my private one, leaving enough to avoid fees, then packed a bag with essentials and my most important documents. When he came into the living room, I was waiting with a folder. What's that? He asked. Divorce papers, I said calmly. I deserve a relationship built on reciprocity and respect. You changed the terms of our marriage unilaterally. I'm done. Shock, anger, disbelief crossed his face in waves. You can't be serious. Because I wouldn't sleep with you? That's what this is about. No, I said. It's about you deciding connection was optional, while expecting the rest of marriage to keep serving you. That's not partnership. He grasped for ammunition. So you're running off to your little art friends. This is about attention. This is about boundaries, I said. Sign and we can do this cleanly. Contest it and we can do it the long way. He stared at the papers, silent. I moved out the next week into an apartment I'd lined up. The divorce proceeded quietly, legally. Finally. It was not easy. It was necessary. Months later, I stood at a neighborhood gallery on opening night of a small group show. 3 of my prints hung on the brick wall. Dawn light spilling over mountain silhouettes. A friend from the photography meetup introduced someone. Maria, this is Jack. He curates trail projects and shoots landscapes on the side. He had a calm, grounded presence and eyes that truly listened. We talked about trailheads and lenses, about getting lost on purpose to find the shot, about work that makes you proud but not hollow. No rush, no need to be captured, just 2 people comparing maps. I didn't know anyone's performance anymore. Not the wife-shaped one I'd been living, not the stoic one I'd adopted to survive. I chose slow coffee after sunrise hikes, a shared Google Doc of trail notes, dinners that ended with dishes washed side by side and laughter echoing into the hall. Jack didn't fix me. He didn't need to. I had already started that work myself. He simply met me where I'd finally learned to stand. When the decree arrived in the mail, one thin envelope ending a 6-year chapter, I took a breath so deep it felt like new air. I texted Jack a photo of a clear horizon line from my balcony. Good light tonight, I wrote. Let's catch it, he replied. I set my camera on the railing, the city soft behind the focus, and thought about the sentence that used to freeze my blood. Not tonight or ever. It had sounded like a door slamming. Turned out it was also a door opening, not to spite, not to spectacle, but to a life where saying no to what breaks you makes room for yes to what builds you. The months that followed were quieter than I expected. There were no dramatic breakdowns, no courtroom explosions, no bitter fights over furniture or bank accounts. Just the slow, methodical dismantling of what had once been a shared life. Jesse signed the papers without contest. Maybe he realized there wasn't much left to fight for. We sold the house, our dream home, the one with the perfect backsplash and the garden I'd agonized over, filled with herbs no one but me ever used. When the papers were signed, I handed him the keys without ceremony. He didn't say thank you. He didn't even look back. When the moving truck pulled away, I stood in the empty living room for a long time. The walls still carried faint outlines where our pictures had hung. Our laughter, our arguments, our holidays, all of it had happened here. And now it was just drywall and echoes. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but instead I felt something different. Relief. Real, tangible relief. I drove straight to my new apartment, a small top-floor space downtown, full of sunlight and silence. It was mine every inch. No shared closet, no competing playlists, no emotional minefields hidden under casual conversation. Just peace. The first night I slept there, I left the curtains open. City light poured in, painting the walls a soft gold. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of someone else's moods pressing into my skin. A few weeks later I met Jack again by coincidence, or maybe timing that finally made sense. He was at a local hiking trail where I'd gone to shoot sunrise photos. I'd seen him before at the gallery where we talked about lenses and light, and the art of waiting for the perfect shot. That morning the trail was covered in mist. He was setting up his tripod when I recognized him. "Mind if I shoot from this angle?" I asked. He looked up, smiled, and said, "Only if you promise not to make my framing look bad." We ended up talking for 2 hours while the mist lifted and sunlight spilled through the trees. The conversation wasn't about relationships or pain. It was about art, patience, and how hard it is to photograph fog before it disappears. He had a quiet humor, the kind that didn't need to dominate a conversation. When I told him I'd recently started showing my work, his eyes lit up. "I saw your prints at the gallery," he said. "You have a good eye for mood." Over the next few weeks we kept running into each other. Sometimes by accident, sometimes because we both stopped pretending it was coincidence. We started meeting for coffee after early hikes, then for dinner, then for no reason at all. Jack wasn't anything like Jesse. He didn't interrupt. He didn't correct me mid-sentence. He didn't treat vulnerability like weakness. He listened, not the kind of listening that waits for a turn to talk, but the kind that truly connects. I told him eventually about the divorce. I didn't rant or dramatize it. I just said he stopped wanting to be part of us, so I stopped pretending that was enough. Jack nodded slowly. "Sometimes letting go isn't losing," he said. "It's just making space for what's next." We didn't rush into anything. I didn't want to repeat my old pattern, mistaking shared comfort for real connection. So we took it slow. Hikes, laughter, photography trips. His presence was gentle but solid, like the mountains he loved to photograph. Meanwhile, my life kept expanding. My photography grew beyond hobby status. The magazine published one of my landscape series, a collection called Stillness After Storms. The editor told me it was the emotional tone that struck readers most, the quiet resilience in the colors, the balance of shadow and light. Maybe that was my story too. I also got a call from my boss one afternoon. "Maria, we're promoting you again," he said. "You've become a force. Whatever's changed in your life, keep it up." I hung up the phone and laughed, not just because of the promotion, but because I finally understood something. When you stop pouring your energy into someone who drains it, that power doesn't disappear. Comes back to you tenfold. A few months later, Jack invited me to join him on a weekend photography trip up north. "Just a short drive," he said. "No agenda, no deadlines, just light and silence." We left early Saturday morning. The road wound through golden fields and into dense pine forests. He drove with one hand on the wheel and music humming low, a soft jazz playlist that filled the space without demanding attention. We stopped by a lake just before sunset. The water was glass smooth, reflecting pink clouds and tree silhouettes. I set up my camera while Jack started unpacking food he'd somehow managed to prepare without telling me. A picnic of sandwiches, fruit, and thermos coffee. "You planned this," I teased. "Only the parts one hoped would make you smile," he said and handed me a cup. As the sun dropped, I snapped photo after photo. Then I lowered the camera just to watch. It was one of those moments that felt suspended between endings and beginnings, between who I had been and who I was becoming. Jack didn't reach for me. He didn't have to. The space between us was enough. The silence felt shared, not empty. That night, sitting by the fire he built, I told him something I hadn't said out loud to anyone. I used to think self-respect meant holding everything together no matter what. Now I think it means knowing when to stop holding what's already gone. He nodded, staring into the flames. "That's not letting go," he said softly. "That's survival." We didn't define anything that night. We didn't need to. Some stories don't need labels. They just need time to grow roots. By winter we were together. Not rushed, not desperate, but steady. I moved some of my art into his workshop studio, where he carved wood frames for both our prints. Sometimes we worked in silence, sometimes with music playing low. Every time I looked up from my camera or editing screen, I saw a man who respected boundaries but still wanted connection. That's what love looked like now. 6 months after my divorce was finalized, my first solo photography exhibition opened at a local gallery. The walls were lined with images taken over the last year. Misty ridges, quiet rivers, dawn breaking after long nights. The title reclaimed light. People came. Old friends, co-workers, strangers. Even my lawyer stopped by to congratulate me. Jack stood near the back, not trying to be the center of attention, just watching with a quiet smile. At the center of the gallery, one image stood out. A sunrise breaking over a frozen lake. I'd taken it the morning after Jesse moved his things out. The caption read, "Endings aren't always dark. Sometimes they're just dawn arriving late." When the crowd thinned, Jack joined me. "You did it," he said. "We did," I corrected. "Every photo here has a little piece of your patience in it." He smiled and handed me a small envelope. Inside was a printed photo, one he'd taken of me that first day on the trail, camera in hand, light hitting my face. On the back he'd written a neat script. "She stopped waiting for permission and started chasing the light." I didn't cry. I just stood there holding the photo, realizing that somewhere between heartbreak and healing, I'd rebuilt my own story. When I got home that night, I poured a glass of wine, opened the balcony doors, and watched the city lights shimmer below. The same view that once looked lonely now looked alive. Jesse had taught me what emptiness looked like. Jack, and more importantly, I myself, had taught me what fullness felt like. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's becoming so whole that you forget they were ever the measure of your worth. I set the photo on my desk beside my camera. The city buzzed quietly outside, life humming forward. I whispered a simple thank you to the lessons, to the pain, to the light that followed. And then I picked up my camera, smiled, and took the next.